So for those of you that decide to go forward with this sort of application, you get the status, you want to keep going, you do the filings, raising money becomes a very big important part of your organization. So my name is Richard Andrews. I'm from UC Berkeley. I teach a course at Berkeley on entrepreneurship for artists, how to create a small business based on your artistic interests. And I've been doing that for about 7 years now. And I made a connection with California Lawyers for the Arts a few years back, and am now here to talk to you about nonprofits for artists. I should mention that my background is, in addition to teaching at Berkeley, I work in a music technology laboratory called the Center for New Music and Audio Technologies. Been around for about 30 years. Invents software, creates compositions and performances here in Berkeley and around the area. I'm also a musician, and I perform in a band that specializes in French popular music from the mid-20th century, so musette style, Edith Piaf, Jacques Brel, that kind of thing. In fact, we did a big concert right here at the Freight and Salvage on July 14th, Bastille Day last year, and we're hoping to come back this year for that. So just a little more about myself. I've also done a fair amount of communications, graphic design, production art, that kind of thing, and project management. So here we go. So I am a lecturer at Berkeley on my topic, arts entrepreneurship, both here at Berkeley and at Colorado State University through distance learning. I'm the associate director of the laboratory that does music technology research and teaching, and I'm also the executive director of something called the Echo Ensemble, which is a new music chamber group that performs through Count Performances in the Department of Music at Berkeley. So choosing a corporate form, this is what many of you are thinking about at the moment. Identifying an appropriate legal structure is really important because it will help drive the potential and future success and sustainability of your business for the long term, right? There are certain ways to manage things like liability, there are tax issues, and there are certainly, for those of you thinking of raising money, a big difference between the nonprofit and the for-profit, right? We'll talk about that a little bit. So for the 501c3 that we've heard about, there are tax issues, there are document preparation and filing issues, and there are raising money issues that go along with all of this. So what should we know about launching a nonprofit? Well, the key distinguishing feature is based on this idea of benefits to society. And those of you who have looked at the IRS site and studied the NOLA Press book, you already know about the benefit to society that your nonprofit is intended to accomplish, right? So the general principle is that you can be tax exempt if you have this sort of charitable cause at the center of your business, right? And you can demonstrate that, document it, and it has to be exclusively for those purposes. You can't have a for-profit kind of business on one side of the house and then on really a nonprofit with this sort of charitable kind of good for society cause. It really has to be the central and main purpose of the organization. So that's something you need to think of very carefully when applying for the status, right? Is what is your charitable purpose? Now, there are different types of charitable purposes that the IRS recognizes. There are ones related to religion, education, science, literary, and other objectives. For those of us in the arts, education is the category that the arts fit within. It turns out that the IRS recognizes arts, creating and presenting art, as a valid educational activity. Okay, so this is the reason why 501c3 organizations like the Freight and Salvage, Berkeley Rep, and even major sort of cultural institutions qualify for that status, is because their charitable purpose is education, even though they're an arts organization. Now, of course, if you are a for-profit arts company, it's very different. You don't have sort of benefits to society at the center of your business concept. You are looking to both generate art, distribute it to an interested public, and generate a profit for yourself and for your team. On the for-profit side, we have a standard S Corp, a C Corp, an LLC, a sole proprietorship. Those are all for-profit business forms. Well, along the way, there was an interest in making a for-profit corporation that had some benefits to society as part of its mission. They didn't want to become a full 501c3 nonprofit. They wanted to be a for-profit corporation, but they didn't want to be sued by their shareholders and by their board for pursuing something other than profit. So what they came up with was something that they insert into the corporate bylaws. It's specific language that says the company can be a B corporation. It's a benefit corporation. And what it means is you are allowed to pursue public benefits even though you are a for-profit. One of the big examples of this here is Patagonia, the company that does hiking sort of wear, right? Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream is a B corporation, and the reason is that they both donate a lot of their proceeds to benefits, right? They do environmental work. So you can be a for-profit company and a benefit corporation without being a nonprofit. The thing about the B Corp to know is that you do not qualify from grants and gifts from foundations and corporations and individuals. You're not a charitable organization, you're a public benefit organization. So there's a distinction there. A lot of people think nonprofit means I don't make any money, and that's not true. Nonprofits can pay their owners and their staff actually quite well, right? People who are the CEO of a major nonprofit like the Red Cross, for example, they make 6-7 figures, right? So nonprofit does not mean you don't get paid. What nonprofit actually means is that you can't take the excess income and pay yourself and your shareholders. There is no such thing as profit. What there is excess revenue. And what you can do with the excess revenue, instead of paying yourself or your staff or your shareholders, is put it back into the business, right? You can pay off some debt. You can expand your facilities. You can hire more people. You can have a bigger web presence. You can have a marketing campaign. So the definition here about the profitability of the organization is that you can't just take that extra money and stick it in your pocket the way you can in a for-profit, right? That's what the for-profit is for. So the nonprofit says any excess revenue can be used to reduce debt, expand the operation, launch new programs, etc., for business purposes, right? But you can certainly pay yourself. What are some of the benefits associated with being a nonprofit organization? You don't have to pay taxes. Access to funding, access from sales, property, and income tax. Many of you are going to be small companies, right? One person, maybe 2 or 3 at maximum. So when I teach my class at Berkeley, I say, you are the company. You need a team around you that you're not going to hire, but they're consultants. So you need an attorney, you need a CPA, you need an insurance broker, and you need a banking relationship. Okay, that's your external team for forming sort of any small business in the arts as far as I'm concerned. So how do you find a good CPA? I don't know, does CLA have a reference for accountants in the arts? I would start with them and say I'm looking for a qualified accountant who can help me, A, sort out the tax issues related to my nonprofit once I get started, and B, help me run the business, right? I'm going to suggest that you look at your near neighbors in terms of concept for the business and find out from them how they've done this, right? Get a local reference for an accountant or an attorney or an insurance broker, because this is how the world works. You need to network your way into the connections because they're not all on the surface, obviously. I think CLA can probably help you with that in some ways to get started. So exemptions from tax, a big reason to do this. Donors, individual donors who give money to nonprofits can deduct that donation from their own taxes. Okay, so now if you know somebody who is not an investor but a donor, there's an incentive for them that they would not get otherwise, right? They're going to be able to write that off. And then, of course, qualifying for grants and gifts from foundations, corporate programs, and government agencies. So the answer is yes, there are ways to find experts, sort of seasoned grant writing professionals, development people, right? There used to be a place in San Francisco called the Foundation Center Library. And the Foundation Center, it's a place where you can do research on grants, basically. And they used to give workshops, and they had a place where you could go in on site and do searches for grants yourself. You could say, oh, I want to do music therapy grant searching. Where do I find it? And they would help you do that. They've since merged with a company called GuideStar. So the Foundation Center plus GuideStar have turned into another organization that's still being sort of developed. But the answer to your question is there are grant writing professionals out there, freelancers. You can find them on Craigslist. You can find them through Indeed, or you can find them through LinkedIn. So that's one possibility. But you may want to do it a different way. You may want to find an organization that already raises money and ask through the network, your close sort of contacts, who they could recommend to work with you as a consultant initially to give you a sense of the scope of the project, and then what it would cost to execute a full-blown fundraising campaign. But you want to ask them a very specific question. Right. Who can help me raise money? In other words, you may, once you become established, go back to that same network of contacts and say, now I've got an organization. How can we work together and collaborate? How can you send me clients? How can I do a presentation for your monthly meeting about what I do? This is going to be the creation of a network that will become a mutual sort of beneficial thing for yourself and your company. Again, there are good reasons to become a nonprofit. there is a lot of paperwork, as you know, and this is just a glimpse through the IRS side about kind of what it takes. We're going to talk a little bit more, and I have a handout near the end that you can look at about just paperwork. Because this is an overview session, I can't give you every detail, but I can certainly give you an introduction. So this is what the IRS says about filing requirements, right? It sounds pretty straightforward. Once you get going, once you're established, again, you want to find a good accountant that can help you deal with all the details on this. So you want to attract grants. This is one of the things that you need to do. And acquiring this is going to be an important part of your venture for the long term. So for those of you that decide to go forward with this sort of application, you get the status, you want to keep going, you do the filings. Raising money becomes a very big important part of your organization. Like you said, there's a whole team of people dedicated to fundraising once you get into that condition, right? And one of those people may very well be yourself. I want to talk about the NOLA Press book. Here's what I want you to consider for all of you who are looking at getting into the nonprofit side of things. NOLA Press, How to Form a Nonprofit Corporation in California. It's a really good book. I know people who have used their publications in the past to form a 501c3, and they say it's successful. It really does work. They used to have another package what was almost a, you'd get a disc and it would give you software and you could put information into the documents and it would give you everything. Now they have it all on their website. But it's pretty reasonable, right? There's an electronic version. And so the short answer to how do I form a nonprofit in California is basically do whatever it says in this book, right? That's sort of that's the gist of it right here. I don't have much to say about this other than go for it. If I was starting a nonprofit next week, this is where I would go. All these kinds of things, you always want the most recent information. It's the same reason to get a really good CPA. Okay, they're going to know all the latest sort of ins and outs of a tax law for you. A good attorney is going to do the same thing. You want the most recent information when you're starting from scratch. So here is just a brief synopsis of what the NOLA Press book has to tell you about how to form a nonprofit. Okay, so you choose the directors, right? Choose a name, and you want to make sure the name isn't already taken by some other corporation, right? You can't create the next Amazon or a Nike, right? You got to do something else, and there's a way to do a search that tells you how. Prepare and file your nonprofit articles of incorporation. Again, the book will help you work through all those issues. And some of you have maybe started this process. You can do it yourself. You can probably hire people to help you with this if you don't feel like you have the language and the sort of the document prep skills in order to do this. You prepare the bylaws for your corporation. So now you're forming the corporation. You're actually putting the package together about what constitutes this organization as a corporation. You hold a meeting of your directors. You have to have a meeting. You have to have a binder for corporate records. You take minutes for every one of the meetings that you do, right? And those have to be available for people who want to maybe audit you at some point. You file your Form 1023 federal tax exemption application. This is the thing that takes a long time to come back. When people say, oh my God, it takes months and years to get this approved, well, maybe not years, but this is what they're talking about. But that's for the federal level. Then you do the same thing for the California state tax exemption, because remember, the tax exemptions are federal and state. And then finally, you have other reporting and registration requirements. So it sounds a little bit daunting. It kind of is. But people do this all the time, right? We know people who have formed nonprofits. They've gone through this. They acquire the status. And even more importantly, they maintain the status, which means regular reporting with the help of your accountant and other people. What about fiscal sponsors? We've been waiting to learn. Okay. There is a way to form a for-profit company and still get access to money from grants and gifts and donations. The way that you do it is to work through a fiscal sponsor. So here's my sort of explanation of how it could work. I am a sole proprietor. We're all sole proprietors, right? You have a social security number, you can be a business, basically, right? You don't have to do anything else with that. But I also have an organization which is artistic. I have a band, I'm a musician, and I want to apply for a grant to do some music education project, okay? So this is different than simply selling something for a profit. I want to do something that has this benefit for society, right? I want to teach kids how to play French music. So this gentleman right here has a fiscal sponsor organization, okay? He has already gotten the 501c3 status that I lack, okay? So when I'm looking at grant opportunities from government programs and corporations and foundations, I cannot apply to them directly, but my fiscal sponsor can apply on my behalf. So I basically make a connection with the fiscal sponsor and I say, hey, here's some grants that I would like to apply for. Can you help me? And the fiscal sponsor looks at my sort of central purpose and either says yes or no. And if they say yes, they take on the responsibility to apply for me with their 501c3 status. They receive the money from the granting organization. They take a little bit out and they give the rest to me. But in addition to making the application happen, they give me advice, they give me support, they give me in some cases training. Okay, so the fiscal sponsorship is more than simply helping me get money I can't get otherwise. They exist because, again, they've got the right status already, so they can qualify for the sort of applying and gaining these grants. And basically, you create a partnership with them. How do you find a fiscal sponsor that's relevant to your purpose, right, to your mission? Well, here's a couple of places to start. Okay, you can actually search on these websites for fiscal sponsors all over the country, sort them by location and by theme. You can find filmmakers, you can find painters and musicians through this. The National Network of Fiscal Sponsors is one place to look. Another one is the Fiscal Sponsorship Directory, and there are other versions of this. But this is sort of the answer to the question, how do I even find a fiscal sponsor to work with, okay? You have to have something about your own separate private organization that has a benefit to society. If really all you're doing is selling something for money, there's no way that the fiscal sponsor can represent your grant application as being something that qualifies to the funder's requirements. See, the funder is looking for something that will be about education or art, right, or health. So they're going to say, hey, fiscal sponsor, why are you representing a company that basically wants to sell, coffee for $10 a cup or something, just to make the money? You have to have a social benefit purpose, even within your for-profit, in order to get the fiscal sponsor to take you on. Here's how you find a fiscal sponsor. Right, you go through some of these sort of avenues here. So how do you work with a fiscal sponsor? Well, you need to be a for-profit, okay? So you're not a nonprofit already, you wouldn't need them otherwise, right? And you have to have a project or a program that benefits society and qualifies as an exempt purpose under the IRS rules. And the IRS website tells you exactly what those are. Okay? And again, if you have questions about this, find somebody in your immediate network that's already been through this process and ask them some questions, right? They'll be able to tell you, well, what is a qualifying social purpose, right, for a for-profit? So here's a couple of examples of fiscal sponsors that you can think about. The first one is called Fractured Atlas. Fractured Atlas is based in New York. It's a very large, well-established fiscal sponsor for all kinds of different art forms. In addition to helping people understand how to do the process and representing them, they also help people do things like get insurance for artists or find a venue in the New York area for an art event. Okay, so Fractured Atlas works with people on the West Coast. They're based in New York, but they're a very good place to start making contact. There's another one locally here in San Francisco called Intersection for the Arts. You may know them. They represent lots of community-based arts organizations, work with all kinds of interesting projects in different neighborhoods all over the Bay Area. So these are just two of many different fiscal sponsors, one a little bit further away, one closer by. There are others in the region as well. And they can give you some pretty good insights. You can contact them and say, hey, I want to be able to work with a fiscal sponsor to do X. Can you help me figure out, A, if I qualify, B, will you take me on for a sponsorship? And by the way, C, I've gone through and done all this research. Here are the grants I want to apply for in the coming 6 to 18 months. So you have to do all that preparation work yourself. There's a couple ways to go about it. The first thing you want to do is make sure you nail down in a very good, sort of precise and easy to understand way what your social purpose is of your organization. You've got a mission statement for your business. So anybody could look at it and understand it. Then you want to do two things sort of simultaneously. You want to do the research for the fiscal sponsor that you're willing to work with. Could be Fractured Atlas, could be Intersection for the Arts, somebody else. And then you want to do the research about the grant opportunities that are out there. Like I said, you want to know for the next 6 to 18 months, what are the deadlines for grants that are relevant to your area? Then you contact your top 3 fiscal sponsors of choice and you introduce yourself. I've got a social purpose organization. I've discovered some grant opportunities that I want to apply for. Can you be my fiscal sponsor to make that happen? And then you see what they say. It may take a little time to go through the process, but your job is basically to define your organization first, find the fiscal sponsor candidates within the world that you live in, and if you can, identify some grant opportunities that are directly related to your purpose. A few more things. There are lots of other choices about the for-profit corporation, sole proprietors, partnerships, LLC, cooperatives, C and S and B corporations, we talked about a little bit, and something else called an L3C, which is a low-profit, limited liability company that's actually a for-profit business that can go after foundation funding I don't have time to talk about that right now. So, interview some local art-related businesses in your world. Find out how they've done this. Work with your network. Find people who will give you advice and counsel. That's a really important step. Try to interview people whose businesses are similar to your own. Consult with an attorney. Hey, you're in a good place to find an attorney, aren't you? About this particular pathway that you want to construct for yourself. And finally, look at the law schools nearby. Find out if there's somebody in a law school that is actually either a professor or a student who wants to sort of work with you as a consultant on this kind of thing. A few more quick resources, then I'll get out of here. I've just published a book on arts entrepreneurship. It's available through the publisher, actually a little cheaper than through Amazon at the moment, but it's brand new, and it basically talks you through the creation of a business plan for an arts-based organization of any kind, both for-profit and non-profit. And then this is my contact information. I have a website that talks more about my work. That's my email address. Feel free to reach out to me if you need some more information.